This is Mississippi, and there's no real delicate way to put this, it's the worst state economy within the USA. Mississippi has the lowest GDP per capita of all the states, one of the lowest labour force participation rates, the highest rate of poverty, and one of the slowest rates of growth within the largest economy in the world. It's not just headline economic figures that paint a bad picture either. These statistics translate to very real quality of life problems in the state as well. Mississippi has one of the lowest life expectancies and overall human development levels anywhere in the US. The average person from Mississippi lives 5 years less and makes almost half as much as the average US citizen. Now, in any group there are going to be those that rank well and those that rank poorly, and a group of states that make up the USA is no different. But the economic challenges of Mississippi are all the more interesting when it's considered that this state used to be the richest in the nation. From first to last, even within an economy like the USA, would be like Luxembourg trading places in the EU with Moldova. Even though this decline has happened slowly, there is still a fascinating economic case study to be had here. Beyond just unpacking the root causes of this century-long decline, the economy of Mississippi can also give economists amazing insights into the challenges of operating within a larger economy where every other state can offer its citizens better opportunities, better living standards, and better support. It's also worth considering if there are any ways to turn this around, or if Mississippi is just going to forever be the economy that peaked too soon in a group of global overachievers. So, what used to make Mississippi the richest state in the USA? How did it go from the richest to the poorest state in the country? And finally, is there any way for Mississippi to regain relevance in the modern economic landscape? Once we've done all that, we can put Mississippi, the poorest state in the USA, on the Economics Explained leaderboard. A critical driver for economic growth has always been investments into technology to increase the country's productivity. So technological improvements can massively improve people's lives without costing more long term. A great example of this is something as simple as the technology of waterproofing, which is where our sponsor Vessi comes in. They use Dymatex technology to make footwear with a waterproof membrane and hydrophobic coating that our channel manager in England can't stop raving about wearing every day he takes his dog out for a walk. And as an Aussie, you can be sure that you're going to get caught out in one of those torrential downpours that comes out of nowhere, and if you're wearing the wrong footwear, it can easily spend the rest of the day sloshing around in your wet socks. Now that I've got them, the new Stormburst high tops have quickly become my go-to daily sneakers. They're very supportive for my foot arches, easy to slip on with these pull tabs, and a better grip than most. For going into the city, the weekender shoes are great with their padded collar around the ankle and cushy soles which can be switched out to customise your shoe for what's most comfortable for you. You can get your own pair of Vessi shoes with 15% off your first order when you go to vessi.com/economics. I promise you'll never look at puddles the same way again. In the early days of the USA, Mississippi was one of, and for a long time, the wealthiest state in the Union. It had a number of things going for it that would all eventually work perfectly against it. Now, there really is no way to avoid it. The state's early economic history was built on plantations that, well, didn't need to pay for their labour. With cheap labour and amazingly fertile land, the region was able to capitalise on its cash crop, which was still in demand all over the world. Remember, land, labour and capital are the vital components to produce anything in an economy, and since early Mississippi had effectively free labour and extremely fertile land, there was no need to invest into capital, which is stuff like roads, machinery, factories and tools, or the stuff that makes stuff. Another way this could be thought of is that at the time, slaves were almost treated like capital instead of labour. They were machines that could be invested into to increase the productivity of a business in the area. In many instances, the state actually opposed normal capital investments because wealthy plantation owners didn't really see the need for things like automated farm equipment when they could just buy more slaves and give them basic hand tools. The land was more than just fertile as well. It was covered in waterways from the Mississippi Delta, which meant that there wasn't much need for roads because things could be easily transported through waterways. Almost all of the state's industry lay directly on these waterways, and even as late as the 20th century, the regions in between these rivers were sparsely populated frontier land. There was also another reason why the state opposed capital development, and that's because public goods would need to be funded through taxes, and since it was only landowners who mostly lived on self-sufficient and secluded plantations who could vote, they didn't want to pay for something that they wouldn't get any benefit from. The same was true for education. Since the state was so rural, the children that did get an education were more often than not privately homeschooled. Even after the Civil War, the state passed a new constitution that heavily favoured traditional agriculture over what was really revolutionising economies at the time, and that was mechanical industry. The state had the potential to do really well in these emerging industries. It had a fair amount of manpower, access to the oceans for trade up and down the coast and even into Europe, but it remained mostly agricultural because that's what the voting base at the time wanted. Now, of course, a lot of that manpower in the state at the time came in the form of recently freed slaves. So yeah, another reason the state resisted industrialisation was because policymakers and potential industrialists at the time just didn't like the idea of black people working in factories. The economic reality was that a lot of what made Mississippi so powerful in the early 19th century was working against it by the end of the century. Slave plantations made the state a lot of money, and being able to leverage the environment to serve these isolated and private plantations kept their operations in the hands of a small group of wealthy landowners.